I am a single mom to a 9-year-old. He currently is, to my knowledge, very naive. He doesn't swear, he doesn't have a console coming this Christmas. So he doesn't speak to his friends outside of school. He has never known me to have a boyfriend. I just want to be prepared for the years when he starts becoming sexually aware. Is it way too early now? What can I do without a man around to have this discussion? Is it a case of shutting the door and giving him privacy? He always walks around naked and sees no issue in this currently. Or should I start talking about his body changing soon? I just want to make sure I do it right and don't mess him up forever. Thank you for all your comments. This has been very enlightening. I am shocked at how young most of the comments are. I fully expected it to be around the 11 or 12 mark. However, I feel much more prepared now than I did previously. Some excellent advice received. I am also sorry to anyone this triggered. I've read some sad stories, and I did not mean to bring this up for you. I am sorry that happened to you, and I hope things are better now. I thank you for sharing, though. Story 1. Something else you could add in when you do start talking to him about his body changing is hygiene. It sounds odd because, of course, he already knows to brush his teeth and things like that. But there are new things that come when your body goes through puberty. He might need help with acne if he gets it. He's going to have to learn how to shave someday, and deodorant and body spray are going to become a thing. He might want help learning how to use gel in his hair or style it a different way. Helping him with these things will aid him in developing a positive self-esteem and self-image. Story 2. Here's the guideline that my family used. If the child is mature enough to ask the question, they are entitled to an honest and complete answer. That includes questions of a sexual nature, but we would give a succinct answer and then ask if that was enough, and if not, elaborate on what remained mysterious or answer the follow-up question. Also, there's nothing wrong with simple nakedness, even after puberty begins. Studies indicate that it is healthy psychologically for kids, both to build body acceptance and also to destigmatize talking about sexual anatomy. However, just like masturbation, there are privacy guidelines. Be naked anytime at home around family, out of sight of the neighbors, and masturbate alone in a room with the door closed. We also allowed passage locks on bedroom doors if requested. Consequently, you need to institute a knock before entering rule and abide by it yourself, in addition to having your children follow the same rule. That way, you can also prevent being walked in on when you are masturbating or have a playmate in your bedroom. I was a precocious pubescent and started liking girls at age 8, which was stigmatizing because all the other boys still thought girls were icky. Even though I knew nothing about how sex worked. Although I did masturbate, it was never fixated on a person. I did not even try that until I was a teenager. My kids are now teenagers. By the way, original poster, I think it's great that you allow your son the freedom to be naked at home, and I applaud you for seeking input about others' experiences of being a boy growing up and how they might have preferred to have been credited and respected. I'm sure you're a great mom. Story 3. I'd say around 10 or 11. It wasn't anything too significant. I just started to like girls more and more and noticed how attractive they were. I'm not sure if there's an age that's too early, since everyone is different. Not every boy needs a man to teach them about sexuality, just a flexible perspective. I'd say teach your son about privacy, let him know that what he's doing, such as masturbating, is okay, and how to respect girls. One of the most important things to teach him is that he should be comfortable around himself, understand what he likes and dislikes. Let him figure out certain things on his own at first, and if you feel you need to intervene or help him, then go for it. Story 4. Around 7 or 8, I found my uncle's adult video stash and watched it. I was confused at first, but then I started to copy the guy and couldn't stop. I became really addicted, but I still hadn't developed feelings for girls. It was not until I was 12 that my dad walked in on me. He laughed and said we needed to talk, calming me down by saying I wasn't in trouble. He told me it's completely normal, but advised not to do it too much to avoid harming myself. I felt really embarrassed, but it was comforting to know I wasn't weird. As for any psychological damage, there wasn't really anything, although in the beginning, I was self-conscious about my size since the guys in the video seemed significantly larger, which made me try stretching out of insecurity. However, around 10, I realized that I would grow, and now I am a happy adult. Should you talk to him about it? I would say eventually yes, but let him discover himself a bit first. Speaking from personal experience, there was comfort in knowing I was experiencing this myself and trying to figure out my own anatomy. You can bring it up by addressing it in a general way so he still has his privacy. For example, saying something like, "Oh, you're almost 10 years old now, and it's time for the talk," makes it feel natural for him to start feeling this way without letting him know you are aware of what he's doing. Story 5. I had sex education in the 5th grade, so that's about your son's age. From what I can remember, it was fairly basic and seemed like they just wanted us to be aware of it. Looking back, the most interesting part was they let us submit questions anonymously if we were curious about anything. I would say that was good enough for me at that age. I think the most important thing is to establish that your son can feel comfortable talking to you about sex. You've got plenty of years to fill him in on the details, but it's good to start off on the right foot. That way, when he does have questions, he'll come to you. Story 6. I started getting powerful crushes on girls at around his age, but I wouldn't say I began to become sexually aware until about 13. As in, I never thought about sex or sexual acts before that. But I think this varies a lot in boys. It can't hurt to start having conversations with him about basic things now, like finding out what his understanding of relationships and sex is now, and guiding it gently as he develops. Be aware that if he hasn't already, he will almost certainly be exposed to and seek out pornography very soon. It's really important that this isn't the only source of information he has about what sex is, can be like, or how adults relate to each other sexually. By all means, give him privacy, but I would advise getting as technologically savvy as you can with making accessing internet pornography as difficult as possible in your house. Things like adult filters and password-protected access after bedtime, etc. If you're lucky, he'll have to make do with imagining or maybe pictures or images stashed away. If you can make it difficult for him to stream hardcore pornography in his room, that will go a long way in keeping him on an even keel. I'm getting bored of repeating myself now, so this is the last time I'll address it. Yes, I know he will find ways to watch pornography. That's fine. The point isn't to shield him completely, that's impossible. The point is to do as much damage control as possible while also teaching him that sex is wonderful and not shameful, and giving him an understanding of context and nuance. He will inevitably find ways to watch pornography, but that's no reason to give him unrestricted and unlimited access to all kinds of internet pornography that may harm his development. The science on the effects of pornography on developing brains is compelling, in my view. Just because it's not possible to stop a child from viewing it completely, this is no reason for parents to abdicate their responsibilities to restrict and manage the child's access to inappropriate materials to the best of their ability, in my view. No child needs hardcore internet pornography. If you disagree, fine. Let your kids watch as much pornography as they like and good luck to you. Story 7. I was in 6th grade when I discovered masturbation. After swimming in the pool, I was in my room changing and noticed my penis had practically disappeared from the cold. I started to tug to make it longer, and the more I pulled, the better it felt. Then, out of nowhere, I just came. Felt so good. At the time, I had no idea what it was. After that, I did it daily. Story 8. I learned what sex was at maybe 6 or 7 and figured out masturbation around the same time, but everyone's different. I'd say 9 to 10 years old is a good time to explain everything. 10 to 11 is when I started wanting to be intimate with anything vaguely girl-shaped. Story 9. Is it a case of shut the door and give him privacy? He always walks around naked and sees no issue in this currently. Or should I start talking about his body changing soon? It's a case of taking an open and joyous attitude to the human body. As for the rest, answer when he comes with questions to the extent his question goes, but without imposing superfluous extras. What can I do without a man around to have this discussion? This is going to shock you almost as much as myself, but no man around having a discussion ever entered into the question when we kids became sexually aware. What age did you start becoming sexually aware? Frankly, it's too far back to remember precisely, but way earlier than 9. Growing up on a farm, animals are constantly engaging in that behavior or trying to do it. Plus, my parents, well, people in general on average, where and when I grew up, were far more relaxed about sex than, say, today's United States or Iran. So I'd say by age 6 to 7, I was definitely aware of what sex is. Story 10. I became very aware of girls from around 10 or something, but I wouldn't characterize it as truly sexual until perhaps 13 and puberty set in at full steam. I was, however, lucky enough to have parents that openly talked about sex, sexuality, and the joys associated with it when I brought the subject up. I think that's very important. My parents told me that I could always come to them with questions, and they would never hide their affection for each other from neither me nor my brother, with hugs, kisses, saying, "I love you," and so on. I had my first real sexual encounter at 15 and have always had a very active sex life ever since. Funnily enough, my younger brother has turned out to be rather bashful and not nearly as adventurous as me. So you can never know. Do your best and do it honestly and without shaming or prudeness, and he will develop into his own person naturally. Treating sex and sexuality as weird, shameful, or something to hide will cause way more harm than a natural, easygoing, and approachable attitude. Story 11. I would say I was around 14 when I started masturbating and looking at pornography. To be fair though, when I was 5 years old, I used to sneak the Sears catalog into the hayloft. I grew up on a farm, and look at the women's bra and underwear section for some reason. Story 12. I genuinely started liking girls in kindergarten. I remember I thought she smelled good and wanted to hold her hand. I'm pretty sure it's where it all began. Story 13. I am a child and family therapist, and I work specifically in children's sexuality and sexual behaviors. I have known children as young as 8 who knew they were bisexual. We are figuring kids are first accessing pornography now between 9 and 11, thanks to the internet. Although we do not like to lean on hard chronological ages for benchmarks for development anymore, because children can have different levels and stages in different areas, 7 or 8 is seen as a sort of shifting period developmentally. For example, it would be considered atypical and somewhat concerning for a child under 7 or maybe 8 to be inserting things into their anus and vagina for sexual stimulation, because for the most part they do not think of their genitals as having things go in them. Only something like a medical procedure might introduce that idea. It would rarely happen on their own, but after 7 or 8, it would fall into a category of more typical sexual self-exploration. However, that does not mean to say that anything children do with their genitals is sexual in nature. Boys grabbing or touching their private parts is often simple self-soothing behavior. It would be wrong to call that masturbation if the child showed no agenda to actually complete the act or be aroused. See how it is complicated. A competent, trained professional in children's sexual behaviors would usually conduct a thorough assessment involving the parent, school, and of course the child himself, before saying anything concrete about that child's sexuality. But generally speaking, you can assume that your child at 9 has sexuality and is a sexual being. What that means for him as an individual is a much more complex question. Story 14. Honestly, I was 14, almost 15, but I know I'm an exception there. My parents never once gave me any sort of talk or anything, so it was mostly from the internet and friends that I learned things. I did have a couple of sex education classes, but they were totally clinical and mostly abstinence-based. I'd say 9 or 10 is a good age to start. Don't get too detailed, of course, but open up a dialogue and make it known he can come to you with any questions without judgment. A little further on, make sure condoms are available to him. If a teenager has their mind set on sex, not having a condom won't stop that. Story 15. I was overexposed as a child and saw my first explicit adult content at the age of around 8. My mother was also very sexually open and promiscuous, so seeing men come in and out of the house wasn't uncommon. Hearing her engage in intimate activities with strangers, walking around the house naked, and finding it funny when I was uncomfortable is not something I recommend. Needless to say, avoid most of that and you should be all set. Story 16. I saw an adult video when I was about 10 years old, in an internet cafe. Some teenagers were watching. I had no idea what was happening in the video, but for some reason, I just couldn't stop watching. From then on, I was always looking for a way to see videos of genitalia. That and breasts. Story 17. I'm not one to answer that, but I'm glad that you are asking because he does need good male friends and role models. I think a male mentor or tutor might help him a lot if you are up for that. A friend or family member would be ideal, but if not, there are quite a few different programs online, and it's up to you what you choose. One key recommendation regarding his sexuality is to let him know that he could be attracted to either gender, and maybe have a man give him the man talk before he hits puberty. I say this because not knowing you could be attracted to your own gender messed me up to a degree I'd have trouble putting into words. I won't bother you with the details, and autism did play a role, but it's worth bearing in mind that every young boy needs to have the possibility on the table. Story 18 about 8 for me. The absolute best things you can do are: do not mention the crunchy socks you found under his bed. Do not come into his bedroom and tear the sheets off him to wake him up for school. Just trust me. As a former teenage boy, just trust me. If you're planning on coming to his room, make sure your footsteps are loud and heavy. Then knock. Wait a few more seconds before opening. It's better for everyone this way. For the love of goodness, do not ask him why his showers are suddenly so long. Honestly, most of this is related to personal privacy, so I'll just sum it up. With the exception of the talk, do not make any mention whatsoever of your knowledge of your son's sexuality or habits. For all you know, he's a genderless individual with no romantic interests.